How's that iPhone doing up there? Is that going to be okay? All right, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Is it catching up with me? Okay.
You're on.
Here we go. Welcome, everybody. We're here broadcasting live on Periscope. Our third session of the communication sessions. And so here we are. Thank you for joining us all around the world. Here we are in a living room in Calgary, Alberta, just as a church, discussing some of these principles about communication. And so welcome into this living room, wherever you're viewing this from and whenever you're viewing it. We hope you enjoy. We've been talking about all kinds of principles having to do with communication. Last week, we dove deep. We had a session that we titled The Depths. And you know what that was about was reaching the levels of communication that we all really, really want to be a part of. The levels of communication that, go down past the small talk and past just the logical things, even ideas and opinions into emotions, and then down on that base level communication where we all want to be, where we're discussing identity and hopes and dreams, the lowest level of communication. And so this week, what we're going to talk about, I just want to give you some information and some tools on what it means, on how to deal with difficulties when it comes to communication. I think I've told you guys this before, but when my wife and I do pre-marriage coaching, we often get the, in answer to the question, what's the strength of your relationship? We'll often get communication is a strength of our relationship, and that's good. And then we'll say, what is one of your weaknesses in communication? And very often times, guess what it is? It's communication, right? Because there can be communication difficulties in a relationship that sometimes for weeks or months or years and years persist. Difficulties that you just don't know how to get around. You just don't know how to navigate certain areas of communication. And so hopefully, whether we're applying this to coupledom or a work scenario or family or friends or however you're applying this, hopefully that you'll get something out of this. And so difficulties. Let's jump in. If you need to fill in the blanks, you should be able to find those from us, from our website.
Oh.
Or
what is your... Sorry.
How we doing? Good. So here we go. Let's just jump in with our first blank. First blank is the word safety. Safety is a fundamental requirement. Everybody find where I say that? We all on the same page? We all good? Okay.
Yeah.
Safety is a fundamental requirement for effective and enjoyable. Those are your next two blanks. Effective and enjoyable communication. Safety is a fundamental requirement for effective and enjoyable communication, especially for it to progress to deeper and deeper levels. All right. You might be in a relationship where the communication just is stilted, or it seems stagnant. It's always kind of on the same level. You don't know how to take it anywhere. This is the issue right here: safety. A conversation has to feel safe in order for it to progress. All right. Next blank. This is a heart condition. How safe a relationship feels, how safe a conversation feels is a heart condition. All right. Therefore, it involves emotions and identity. Right. It goes down to that deeper level, right down through the emotions and into identity. Safety. You can feel quite safe with logistics and even your ideas and your opinions, depending on how much you care about whether people agree with you and what people think. But as soon, especially as you go into areas of emotion in communication, go down to that level, or areas of, like intimate areas of identity and dreaming and the vision for your life. As soon as you go into those kinds of areas, it's a heart issue for sure, and involves emotions and identity. As soon as communication is unsafe, here's what happens. There's your blank, unsafe. As soon as communication is unsafe, we won't offer our best to it. This is just a given. To the degree that you feel a relationship or a conversation is unsafe, you're not going to give your best to it. All right? So as soon as communication is unsafe, we won't offer our best to it, and we begin to play games. And have you ever been in a conversation like that? Of course you have. All right? Games in communication, it's called manipulation. Right? You're playing games with somebody. You're trying to, you've ever said that to somebody? I'm not going to play your games. Do you ever say that? Right? And here's why, right? They're playing games. It's manipulative, and you can tell. This happens when a relationship is unsafe. Defenses go up. When communication is unsafe, we begin to play games. Defenses go up, and conflict ensues. Right? Isn't that true? We've all been in conversations like that. Probably today we've been in conversations like that, right? Me with some of you in this room. Just kidding. I'm not going to point that out here. But I'm telling you, as soon as a conversation is unsafe, that's what happens, right? And so to restore safety or to create a safe environment, to be aware of how safe a relationship is, a conversation is, sets us up for success, okay? So I want to give you a few ideas here about the atmosphere that's required for this safe connection. Okay, that's your first blank actually in this section. The atmosphere or set of conditions for a great connection is generated by our values. The atmosphere or set of conditions for a great relationship is generated by our values. It's interesting to think of a conversation as having an atmosphere, isn't it? You know, like you'd walk into a room and the music that's playing, the ambience and the lighting, you know, the furniture, the tidiness or the messiness of a place, whatever, all sets an atmosphere, isn't that right? It's interesting to think of a conversation having an atmosphere, right? So you walk into your boss's office and you sit down, what's the atmosphere? You know, you're just kind of like, you're all kind of sitting around talking in the lunchroom, what's the atmosphere, right? You're walking into a Christmas party, right? What's the atmosphere? Conversations have an atmosphere, and the way that you set the atmosphere in a conversation, it's not by lighting, right? And it's not by furniture and all those kinds of things, although the physical atmosphere can be conducive or not. But the way that you set an atmosphere, it's generated by our values, all right? You can see that there. For great connection, the atmosphere is generated by our values. It's what you believe. It's the basis of belief. It's the way that you do things. It's the values that you're bringing across in that communication, okay? So stay tuned. Here are 4 basic values of all great relationships. So relationships that are thriving, relationships that are growing, that deliver to us that place of communication that we want, which is to be into our emotions and sharing identity, sharing who we are with each other, being known and being known. Relationships that produce that for us all have these 4 basic values. Okay, you ready? And so you're going to measure your marriage up with this, a close work relationship, friendship, that kind of thing. Here they are. Number 1, first value, we believe the best about each other. We believe the best about each other. That's a value that's held by the 2 parties in a great relationship. We believe the best about each other. Unequivocally, we're just believing that the other person is out for our good, that they have our best interests at heart, that they're good people, that they don't, that they're not mean, or they're not being vindictive, or they're not being hurtful, and if they are, they're not doing it on purpose. Right? Everybody follow that we believe the best about people. It's a huge core value. You know, we've counseled couples well into their relationship and marriage, and we've kind of uncovered this, that really because of previous hurts, or, you know, maybe in the relationship or prior to the relationship, because of previous things that they've been involved in, that they don't believe the best about each other, right? All guys are, all women are, right? And they bring that kind of stuff into their relationship and their marriage, and then they're like, you know what? At the end of the day, I don't believe the best about this person. There's a part of me that's guarded. There's part of me that's thinking that that person is not out for my best interest. And so you restore that, and you help to restore safety. The atmosphere in the conversation becomes better. Okay, number 2, a value of all great relationships. Measure your close relationships up to this as we talk about it. Number 2, the purpose of whatever we're dealing with is to draw us closer. Okay? The purpose of whatever we're dealing with, whatever's on the surface, whatever's on the coffee table of our conversation, no matter what it might be, the logistics of family life, or the, you know, some deeper issues that we're talking about, no matter what it is, the purpose of it is to draw us closer. This is so important, because the purpose is not to be right, or to get your way, right, or to make the other person feel stupid, right? The purpose of what's ever in front of you is to draw you closer, right? As a couple, as friends, even in a work environment, a working relationship, you know, you've been in part of a team where you're struggling around a challenge or trying to accomplish something. The purpose of that is to draw you closer. If you believe that as a team, or as people working on something, that increases the atmosphere and the safety of the relationship. Number 3, your heart is more important than what I'm trying to say. Here's a value that will take you through the thick and thin of navigating difficult areas in relationship right here. When you believe, when you see about each other that, hey, wait a second, your heart, who you are, is more important than what I'm trying to say. Or when we get passionate about a topic, or we get a little bit angry, or we get a little bit, you know, a little bit frustrated or whatever, it's really easy to lose focus of that, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But if we'll come back to that over and over, even in the difficult places of a relationship, and say, wait a second, you know, what you are more important than me getting my way, or me getting what I want out of this relationship, right? If we can get to that place where we're reaffirming that, or where we're believing that, that as well, it increases the atmosphere and the safety of a relationship. Number 4, I respect you and honor you and don't intend to harm or hurt you. This is a value something that you believe about the other person. And if both people believe this, the atmosphere in a relationship is good. I respect you and honor you, and I don't intend to harm or hurt you. All right, so in a safe environment, for safety and communication, these things are understood. And if you think about the conversations that you have with people where things are relatively easy to talk about, you can bring up a topic, maybe even something that's contentious, and you can bring it up and you can talk about it. If you think about relationships where things go well, these values are at the basis of your communication. You think about relationships where you're not sure, where it's stilted, where your defenses are up, where it maybe is slightly manipulative, where you just kind of keep your distance. It's because these values are called into question. Isn't that right? I mean, just like a quick scan of these, you can see that. All right? Let's cover the next two statements. It kind of summarizes this portion here. A hostile atmosphere is where one or more of these values is compromised. Okay? A hostile atmosphere is where one or more of these values is compromised. A safe atmosphere are where these values are shared and reaffirmed often. You and I mean, we can go a long way in increasing the safety of our relationships just by surfacing these values that are in our hearts and talking about them and just saying, I just want you to know. I don't know if you've ever been in a difficult conversation, like husbands and wives, in coupledom. One of the things that you can do when you're in kind of like a fight or a bit of a squabble or there's tension building, one of the things that you can do is just kind of reach across the table and hold that person's hand for a minute, and you can say, hey, listen, I don't know how this conversation is going to go, but I want you to know we're going to be okay. That we're going to be okay, right? So you're reaffirming the relationship, and you're taking time out of the conversation to say, listen, all this aside, all my frustration aside, I know we're going to come through, right? Because you're reaffirming these values in the relationship. In that case, you'd be reaffirming value number 2, right? The purpose of whatever we're dealing with is to draw us closer, right? Just to take a second out and to say that kind of thing. We can go a long way in increasing the safety of our relationships just by drilling down on these and highlighting them. All right. We're talking about difficulties tonight. That was about safety and about how to increase safety. We're going to get back a little bit more to safety a little bit later on. But I want to cover a little bit of ground here first. Better than resolving a fight that you might have with a boss or coworker or friend or spouse, better than resolving a fight is, your next blank, preventing one. Isn't that right? There's a lot of ground that we can cover. There's a lot of benefits that we can get just with thinking through where this is going to take us and then preventing the argument that happened the last 500 times we brought this up. Isn't that right? Without walking down that same road that coworker did or whatever, we can anticipate what's going to be difficult. I mean, couples, you can do this as couples, even as friends and so forth, the key relationships, you can say, what were the last 4 arguments that we had? Well, it was about, the way that we spend money. And then it was about something to do with the kids and how to discipline them. And then it was about, when to go to church or which church to go to. And then it was about, right, you can highlight the last 4 areas, whatever. And then you begin to realize, there's no real new ground here. These are all the arguments that we have by and large. Some kind of periphery kind of statements, but really it all boils down to these areas of relationship, right? So we have these same arguments over and over. Okay, so how about some energy and some effort and some focus on how to avoid those arguments? Not how to avoid those topics, because those topics need to be brought up. Those things matter. But how to avoid the contentious side, right? How to avoid the arguments. And so better than resolving a fight is preventing one. And so when you feel like you're approaching conflict, I want to give you a couple of kind of things for insight and things to do to navigate around it. All right? And so here's something to remember. This first statement here under this heading. The fight itself is rarely the real issue over which you're about to fight. The fight itself, can you get your head around that this evening? Some of you need a little bit more coffee or something. All right. The fight itself is rarely the real issue over which you're about to fight. Man, that's true, isn't it? I mean, we know that. There's stuff going on inside that we're not about to let anybody know. And yet, how is it manifesting on the surface? It's a fight about, who's going to take the dog for a walk or, You know, whatever. There's a squabble about something on the surface, but man, you know, that's really not what it's about. Isn't that true? All right. So let's look at this. So here's why. Here's a number of things why here, just to kind of surface this and remember this in our relationships. The first bullet point: projection is often at play. Have you ever been guilty of that before? Projection is at play. So you have a bad day at work, so you come home and you kick the dog. The poor dog. Didn't do anything at all, right? I don't have a dog, so don't phone into the animal abuse center or anything, but I'm just saying. I mean, that's pretty classic, right? You have a negative experience somewhere, or a frustrating experience somewhere with somebody, with some group of people, and what do we do if we're not careful? We move over and we take it out on a completely unsuspecting, it's unfair and it's unjust other person or other group of people. Isn't that right? I mean, there's no hard lines between our work life and our personal life. Do you notice that? I mean, you are who you are, and you live how you live, and you go to both, and you're the common denominator, and so what shows at work shows at home, what shows at home shows at work. Isn't that true? I mean, these things leak. They're not these independent watertight compartments, no matter how much we like to think that they are. And so projection is often at play. I mean, you know, you have a bad day at work, you come home, you kick the dog. That's like a very blatant sort of projection issue, but there's many other subtle ways that we project as well. A slight difficulty or a niggle or an irritation in one area in one relationship can spill over and leak into our other relationships. There's emotion and angst from other areas of life. When this is happening, this is just kind of an aside, we would be very smart when this is happening. You can jot a note for this, is to be fair to the other people in our lives and let them know what's going on. Isn't that right? You know, when we know that we're at risk of leaking some of our stuff that has nothing to do with these people, right? Just to let them know. You might find me a little bit, it's difficult tonight. You might find me a little bit irritated. I've just been dealing with something at work, right? That's a lot better than coming home at 5, and after 6 hours of kind of like, irritability and, whatever, like finally saying, you know what, work was just such a pain today. Isn't that right? Right? To let people know what you're going through. I'm just fighting some kind of like flu or a bug. I just feel really tired and drained lately. It's nothing to do with you. Please don't take it personally. I mean, that's really positive to do that. So projection, to be aware of that is a huge way to avoid conflict before it happens. When we're doing this, here's what's happening. Completely unrelated emotions are creating a momentum behind our fighting and our squabbling. Completely unrelated emotions are doing it. I mean, how much does that happen? Like, if you could take your arguments or your frustrations with communication, and you could cut out all the ones that happen because of this projection issue, what percentage would that be? I think it would be fairly significant, wouldn't it? I think that happens to us a lot, where completely unrelated emotions are creating the momentum behind the fight. The biggest thing about this is recognition. You know what? I'm aware of myself, and I'm aware of my limitations, and I'm aware of what I might be like right now. And so I'm just going to let people know, or I'm going to modify my actions accordingly. Second bullet point. Oftentimes, the real issue over which you're about to fight is not the issue that you're actually talking about. It's because of this second bullet point. A deeper connection or underlying conversation is often being expressed. A deeper connection or underlying conversation is often being expressed. There's the another way of saying this is that there's the conversation that you're having, but then there's the conversation under the conversation, right? Let's just say it's a financial issue, right? Say that there's this ongoing kind of struggle and tension. One of you in a marriage, let's say one of you's a saver and one of you's a spender, right? Or one of you's a money avoider, let's say, and the other one's a spender, And there's this kind of like underlying tension going on. And the conversation on the surface could be, hey, we should buy these cookies from the Girl Guide that just showed up at the door. We should buy these cookies. They look good, right? And there's this little bit of tension on the surface, right? Talking to, and the girl with the cookies kind of like looks a little bit kind of like wide-eyed, kind of like, what have I stumbled into here? As the squabble kind of goes back and forth or whatever. What's going on? There's the conversation, right? But then there's the underlying conversation of, we really need to deal with this, right? Like there's a tension here that is making us not function properly. And so oftentimes a deeper connection or underlying conversation has often been expressed. And if my experience is true, oftentimes it never does get expressed. The deeper one just never does get expressed. It's just, if we're not careful, it's just all the issues on the surface that keep on getting irritated by this underlying issue. And so something to be aware of. Next bullet point, Oftentimes, the fight is rarely about the issue that you're actually fighting about. It's about something deeper. Atmosphere or safety has been compromised. Back to what we were talking about earlier with those 4 values. You know, one of those values, all of a sudden it seems like it's out of whack. You know, it's just not there. It's just like there's something going on. Atmosphere or safety has been compromised. When this happens, a compromised value is creating the momentum behind the fight. I'm using those words, creating the momentum behind the fight, for these because if you ever kind of felt dragged into a fight, have you ever felt that? You know, like you would otherwise be having an okay evening or an okay day at work or an okay day out with your friend or family. You know, things would otherwise be okay at this Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner with all your family around. But there's this thing that's happening. You don't know why it's happening, and you kind of get dragged into this difficult, contentious, argumentative, irritable kind of place. Do you ever find that happening? Mm-hmm. Right? Y'all like got halos on tonight, but I know we're all there. I mean, difficulties happen, right, where you find yourself kind of sliding into it. Do you feel like that? Like you're on a slippery slope sometimes, and you don't want to go there, but you're kind of sliding into this place of like disagreement or contention or the argument that you had before, and you don't want to go there. Why is that momentum there? Like, why is that draw or that pull into that communication? And oftentimes it's because of these things, and to be aware of them is a huge asset. This is true. This next bullet point here, 90+% of arguments are about semantics. So your key word there is semantics. 90% of arguments are about semantics. It's the way that you just said that, right? Or the word that you just used to communicate that doesn't really mean what you want it to mean, right? It comes across to that other person because of the day that they had, the projection they're bringing into the relationship. It's coming across in a negative way. So semantics is the way that you define and that you use words. It's your frame of reference. You know, Mara and I, we often kind of laugh about this. You know, like what I mean by "I'll be home soon" is quite different than, you know, what she would mean if she said "I'll be home soon." Right? Isn't that true? Like she'll catch me telling kids something, you know, something to do with, you know, like, "I'll be right back." You know, like what is that? What does that mean? Wait a second, because you mean you're going to go for a couple appointments and then some errands, and you'll be back at the end of the day. Right? But to a kid, right, that means something different, right? Frame of reference. So 90% of our arguments have to do with that. They're caused by these little semantics, and that's a high percentage, and that comes from that comes out of research, that there's that percentage of relationship difficulties, of communication difficulties that are coming from misunderstood words. We didn't even mean what that person is arguing with us about. Isn't that right? Right? That's where it comes from. 90%, 90+%. Okay, so in this case, it's misunderstood words, vocabulary, or perception are causing the momentum behind the fight. All right. So to be aware of those things helps us kind of step back a little bit, to be aware of ourselves and what we're bringing into a relationship, in a communication setting, and causing some of the lack of safety in the relationship. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to create more safety, how to recognize when safety is not there in a relationship, and how to build it back. All right. We'll see you in a few moments.